What's up, everybody? Wes, Dead Air Knife here with Always.
Typical Lydia.
Today's show, we're going to be doing the 1998 cult classic, The Faculty.
I was wondering what sound you were going to do, and I didn't think you were going to make a little axolotl blurble of underwater creature.
No.
Oh wow, that's good. That's a deep cut.
I thought I would do a sniff because of all of the drug promotion that is in this film, Lydia. So instead of the anti-drug campaign of the 1980s and early 90s, we are affixed squarely in the late 90s, where drugs are cool and the only way to defeat aliens.
I think this was really like a few years before people were like snorting Ritalin and shit like that, wasn't it? Because like I don't remember a lot of pill usage in high school, and this is prime high school for me. This would have been the first year I went into high school because I started, I believe, in 1990, and I started college in 1994. So like a very Doogie Howser method there, but I don't recall kids snorting shit, even doing coke.
Now I'm just picturing you on a giant Apple computer summing up your day at the end of the night. Do 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 do.
Doogie was my hero, and Alex P. Keaton.
I always was very proud of myself while watching Doogie Howser, because there was an episode in which Doogie gets his ear pierced, and for the duration of the show, Neil Patrick Harris had his ear pierced, and I would always point out obnoxiously, because I was a precocious little boy, did you see his earring? He got that in a different episode.
Bet you didn't know that. Yeah. That's adorable.
Yes, but we're not here to talk about Doogie Howser. That's my other podcast, Doogie and Me, which is every other week.
Oh man. Speaking of every other week, we are belated on this episode, and I must apologize to everyone, including Wes, especially Wes, because my computer ate my homework and don't have an episode. We recorded the most important episode ever, covering Late Phases, the werewolf film, which we will return to because it was a good film and I want to talk about. We had a great talk about it, and I keep holding out hope. I even saved the template of that particular show that has Wes's audio and a big red stripe for mine, because I upgraded DaVinci Resolve and it threw out some scratch files that I didn't know existed, and poof, there went all my end of the audio. So I don't know. I've tried recovery efforts for days and nothing worked, and I was so mad. So we're gonna just eat it, I guess, and then we'll re-record it someday, unless some miraculous bullshit happens where I can recover that audio, but I think it's gone.
Yeah, it is officially lost media. It's going to be our London After Midnight. Now, sometimes, dear listeners, we have fucked up recordings and we've literally started again from scratch. The one thing that I will say is that it is hard. Lids and I are fucking professionals, and if the mood was right, I would have gotten back in this fucking chair and turned on my microphone, because I am a goddamn professional. But sometimes the energy is just kind of out of the room, and we discovered it a little late. It had been some time, and our schedules didn't line up. So we thought the best thing would be to move on with our next planned film. We, like Lydia said, we will return to Late Phases. So sorry to everybody if you were looking forward to that, but we press forward. And we go forward by looking back to the old decade of the 1990s. We're going to be spending a little bit of time in the 1990s for the next little bit.
Which is nice, and even coming from me, who is anti-nostalgia. I am hardcore anti-nostalgia. I'm not interested in looking back. A lot of my high school times and pre-high school times were like the worst years of my life. I didn't like it. Nothing fucking cool happened. Neon sucked. Velcro is terrible. Like, I'm not interested in going back to that time. I'm not interested in discovering the little foundations of my fucking personality. And no, I've lived with me all this time. I know how that happened. I don't need to like look back. I find people who are nostalgia bound often have a problem dealing with the present and the here and now. So it always speaks to me in the Victorian sense where nostalgia was an illness. But that said, it sure is fun to go back and watch these old movies, especially like The Faculty, where I didn't necessarily misremember, which we'll talk about in a second, but I I didn't remember how cool of a fucking movie it was, how well written it was. I didn't remember just how star-studded this cast was. I didn't remember how cool the creatures looked. I vaguely remembered it. You would have asked me 2 weeks ago if I recalled a lot of The Faculty. I would think that I recalled, like, not scene for scene, but, like, really relatively well the whole plot and key lines and settings and such. I didn't, though. Not at all. This was so fun to go back to, and I think it holds up really, really well.
Yes, this is a Lydia pick. You had revisited the film on your own and you had decided to bring it to the show. I had seen The Faculty before, but back when it originally came out, so back in 1998, and I had really confused it with many, many plot points and scenes from a different film called Disturbing Behavior. And and in my mind, I remembered the pool sequence in The Faculty, and then for some reason, everything else was just scenes from Disturbing Behavior. So I had kind of combined two films into one singular film, Disturbing Faculty.
I would have loved to see this film because you add a little extra boners to The Faculty, which is like suspiciously absent of boners for the most part. So like that would be a fun damn movie. And that would have everything. That would almost be a Richard Lehman book right there, like balls out, extreme horror insanity.
Yeah, but that is not the case. It's important to remember, dear listeners, that in 1998, um, Scream had happened, and Scream is very much why this film happened. But this isn't the first time that we had seen films similar to this in this decade. There's something interesting going on now about the perception of horror from the 1990s. I'm very obsessed with talking about the perception of horror from decade to decade. And for many people of a certain age, I'm pretty much thinking of people in the Gen X demographic and up, really consider there is books, there is all kinds of information available from people of this age bracket discussing horror from this decade and treating it as effectively a no man's land with only a handful of horror films that are worthy of discussion. And the only ones that they seem to bring up are post Scream films. It's interesting as younger people who were experiencing horror for the first time in the 1990s are growing older. They're the ones making the videos, they're the ones writing the books, they're the ones making the documentaries. We'll see what In Search of Darkness 1990s has to say about this decade. I'm interested to see what films they cherry pick from that expanse of time. But before Scream, horror and CGI were starting to marry, and there was lots of films like Species and Mimic and things of that nature where we were now incorporating a lot of CGI special effects to get the job done, whereas practical effects would have been the case. Anaconda comes to mind. This is all kind of coming out in and around the same time. But they were missing one key ingredient: sexy teens and slick writing, or slick writing if you like Kevin Williamson's writing. I will not go on a tangent about Scream. Whether or not I like that film is not relevant to the fact that lots of people like that film. And in December, Christmas of 1996, Scream was released and made Miramax a fuck ton of money. And so the Weinsteins got together, purchased a script, demanded a rewrite from their new golden boy, Kevin Williamson, got Robert Rodriguez to direct. Kevin Williamson was going to direct this film, but wanted to do a different project, Teaching Mrs. Tingle, which was another script that Williamson had written. That film was entirely his baby. This script was a rewrite. And they created The Faculty in the spirit of Scream, also releasing this Christmas of 1998.
What I think is great about this teen horror cycle, and I only call it that because that's the name of the book by Alexandra West that covers this era. She's one of those few rare Gen X people that remember back to the day where there's movies other than just Scream and the so-called no man's land, as he so eloquently put it, because that is exactly how so many Gen Xers remember it. But then it takes an exennial who, the people who are not millennials, but they're more leaning into the Gen X demographic who go, wait a fucking second. Yeah, there was all kinds of really cool horror films. And I think part of it is my problem in my intro talking about never wanting to look back. Neon sucks, that sort of idea. That's the idea that we have of the 90s. The time we spent in the 90s was not good. And I think that that's part of the illness that plagues horror of the 90s. And a lot of it, if it's good, is lumped in where? The 80s. Everyone has a huge reverence for 1980s horror. And I make this mistake all of the fucking time, and so do all my other booktube buddies, because right now we're reading a bunch of 80s horror, and I'm using scare quotes around that because it's not. We're reading Richard Lehman. The bulk of his books were written throughout the 90s. He's got some 80s titles. He's got a lot of posthumous 2000s titles, but almost all of his books came out in the 90s. That makes them 90s horror. They're awesome. We think of them as 80s horror. I'm not exactly sure why, but I think it is to do with the idea that we're convinced the 90s sucked. They sucked politically. They sucked in like a socioeconomic sense. They sucked in some of the struggles that we'll talk about as far as like race and creed and preferences and sexuality, religion. There's all sorts of problems in the 90s that maybe we just want to forget because we're assuming that a lot of the movies around that time sucked. We saw a lot of made for TV movies coming out at that time that did suck. And I like look at Platinum Dunes, The Asylum, movies that me and Chris were just talking about, the Asylum films, and I just looked at their huge roster of bullshit, the sort of stuff my mom loved, but it was accepted and understood to not be good. So maybe that's what has tainted our perception of the 90s. I hope that In Search of Darkness talks to Alexandra West, because I've not read that book, and I should, because she's a fantastic writer. And I think it is because I'm one of those stupid Gen X people that look back and go, oh, the 90s sucked. The 80s were great.
I am a few years younger than you are, and I really feel like the 1990s were a formative decade, excuse me. When 1990 happened, I was 7 years old, so I was still fairly young. By the time 1996 rolled around, Scream became one of the first R-rated movies I got to see in the theaters. I was not old enough to go to see an R-rated movie in 1996, but I was taller than every other kid. So I was, and back then being tall meant that you got into movies and you could buy tickets for your friends and you could go to the movie theaters. That's how I saw Scream and Mortal Kombat and all kinds of cool things that an enterprising young boy who was tall for his age would want to go and see. I was good at passing. I have defended the 1990s, but I do admit that at times, when I go back and I look at films from particularly the 1990s, there is something so odd about how they were produced, something so odd about the lighting, something so odd. We had we had moved into the early 90s and there was still a lot of vestiges from the 1980s. And I think that was just because, like you had pointed out, some people just carry over their interests and their styles and the films that they were watching from previous decades. That's why so many films in the 1970s were inspired by films from the 1950s. Carpenter and Hooper and all of those guys were making direct references to those films, those weird sci-fi movies from back in the day. So when it comes to this decade, I think that there is a mixed bag. The biggest problem is that mixed bag. The biggest problem is it's hard for people to articulate what this decade of horror is defined by. You can say the 90s teen horror cycle, but as I like to point out to people, December 1996, December 1996, 97, 98, 99, we're out of here. 3 years does not a decade make.
Yeah, you could also say that it's defined by its floating head fucking one sheets because that's what all movies had at that time. All of them. Fucking all of them. Just floating head teens, put some ominous looking lettering, refer to a college or a university. And then you got
Yeah.
Skull and Bones or whatever that movie's called.
No, it was called Skull and Bones. And also, look at the fucking poster for Disturbing Behavior and look at the poster for The Faculty. I defy you to fucking show me a difference.
Yeah, if you took all of those and some action films and things like On Golden Pond, which is a little earlier, of course, but like take all of those floating head fucking movies, take the text out and blur it a little, I think some people would be hard pressed to remember back, unless they have a photographic memory, of course, or have recently looked at all of these or own them all and watch them regularly, which is a rare duck. Some people would like to think that they are steeped in this nostalgia when quite often they're not really. I hesitate to think, what will the filmmakers be looking back on a decade from now when a lot of the films that they would be referencing were remakes?
Yeah, there was something that I believe I remember, and again, the more exposure to younger people that I have now, thanks to the audiences that I interact with on TikTok, it throws this quote that I used to really believe in. Back in the day when the rush of 2000s remakes was coming out, Tony Timpone had made a comment about, does anyone really think that anyone will ever want to watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake when the original is so much better? Basically saying that these remakes were these flash in the pan things that nobody is going to care about. They're just quick cash grabs. And don't you worry, don't you fret, because once they're out of theaters, they're gone from people's minds. Incorrect. Not correct. What he failed to realize at the time was not everyone was an adult man. The people who were young and experiencing those films for the first time will look you dead in your eye and tell you that the 2003 Texas Chainsaw is better than the original. They will look you dead in the eye and tell you that the Hills Have Eyes remake is better than the original Hills Have Eyes remake. And they are not fucking joking. So I think that is all we can really say about the perception of horror in the 90s is entirely a generational thing, entirely.
And that's why we're suffering through in a way now with a lot of internet culture. We just as older people just don't get it or claim to, because there's a lot that you can get if you just open your mind a little tiny bit. What I won't get is the love of nostalgia for things that aren't good, unlike The Faculty. I mean, I don't know why more people haven't watched this, why it is a cult classic. And part of me wants to say, "Oh, no, it's not lots of people like The Faculty." Lots of people talk about The Faculty, but it's horror people who have looked back specifically when they've realized that they've thought, along with many other people, that the '90s was a no man's land for horror, to prove to themselves or discover that it wasn't, because they were obviously watching this shit back then. Because I listened to The Faculty of Horror, and Andrea Subasati from Rue Morgue Magazine, who's on that podcast, had said once, every time I look up my friggin' podcast, I get The Faculty. And then they go on a Josh Hartnett jag, because that's what happens when you mention Josh Hartnett. Everyone just hyper focuses on Josh Hartnett for 20 minutes. It's great. So I had thought of The Faculty. I hadn't gone back and watched it because, as I mentioned, I thought I knew it. If you haven't watched The Faculty in a long time, or if you've never, I really say pick it up, because you won't have remembered it. I swear to God. Maybe it's just because it's been too long, or maybe we had our minds on other things while we were watching it. Maybe it was the beginning of devouring films for consumerist reasons and not because we were watching them for joy like people used to. Maybe it was the beginning of this consumerist entertainment thing, which is what a lot of people say people do now. It's mostly for the water cooler. They're not like getting value out of it. Maybe that was the beginning of that sort of devouring films.
It could be. I do associate this very much with just yet another morsel in a steady diet of pop culture that I was consuming
Mm.
as a young person. Me and my friends would go to the theaters, we would rent movies, and it would just be, yeah, fuck it. This is just yet another film that seemed like it was meant for our peers. And so perhaps that is where it comes from. At least that's where my perspective of this film came from, and why I don't remember it too well, because it was just, again, it's just more just hanging out with my friends, watching movies that were coming out at the time. So fuck all that, Lydia. We've been talking for like 20 minutes about everything under the sun except for what this movie is even about anyways.
This is about outsiders entirely. It is about feeling alien in the high school, and what movie in the '90s that has to do with teens that's within the teen horror cycle isn't. But it's also about the one of the most poignant lines. I don't run unless I'm being chased. And I find that in a sideways fashion proves that these outsider kids, because they kind of technically are, even the hot ones, have been running even though they're not being chased, but in a different way. They've been observing other people, they've been mixing drugs in their bathroom and selling to other kids. They've been, hiding behind a cloak of heteronormativity, or hiding behind a cloak of homosexuality. They've been hiding behind the cloak of the new girl. They're all sort of running without being chased by doing these things that outsiders do that prepare them when faced with adversity from the normies, who are the real scourge here, aren't they?
Very well put. Very well put. I think that all of that nuance was lost on me because I was blinded. It's a good thing that this film is about aliens, because there's a galaxy of stars for us to look at.
Oh my god. Yeah, no, it's true. It's really true. Yeah. It's you could explain it away like, of course, is an alien film because everyone is otherworldly attractive here. Uh, but I guess that's also just casting in this day and age of the 1990s.
It's really true. We hadn't quite gotten the CW treatment that was coming. Don't you get it twisted. There was lots of films coming out in the late 90s, early 2000s that was, if you were relatively on a relatively successful television show from Warner Brothers, you would definitely get into some slashers and other horror films, but this is really a collection of young stars, young, older, but still relatively new to being uber famous stars, and also just chock a block full of every character actor that you could think of to fill out what is a gargantuan cast.
It is a gargantuan cast. Luckily, everyone is so singular, fairly well written, and three-dimensional that it doesn't seem too overwhelming. And we also have sort of this red carpet feeling. It doesn't hurt that we have a red carpet title sequence where characters are introduced like it's Saved by the Bell.
It is really reflecting this trend in the 1990s where you were getting directors to make films who cut their teeth making music videos. That's what all of this stuff reminds me of, this new sort of digital way in which people were editing their films, quicker cuts, less singular shots staying in one place, graphics and music, everything combined together to make everything as slick as possible. I don't know if Robert Rodriguez had cut his teeth making music videos, but I wouldn't be surprised. But at the same time, I know that this was all reflective of this new kind of slicker MTV style of movie making. And this title sequence is hysterical. But this movie starts twice, Lydia. It absolutely starts twice because we are going to get some offspring. The kids aren't all right. Take that, mom and dad. And we are going to get some Robert Patrick screaming obscenities. We're going to get some football. And we are going to get a very grisly murder.
I do like this movie starting twice very much. I don't know, like the origins of Robert Patrick, like the T2 entirely in my mind. So you expect him to have like an edge of anger. You expect him to have super strength and be powerful, and you're immediately scared of him. So I think it works extremely well. I like the foreboding nature too, because you sort of get some like almost killer point of view shots within this that set you off kilter, knowing that there's some sort of interloper at this school right away.
There's something so interesting about how this film starts, and then we go towards a slashing and stalking sequence, but also we are going to get a very clear message, Lydia, about the level of violence that we can expect to see in this particular film. I am not going to go say that it is the most gory thing that you're going to see. However, I will say surprisingly gory.
Have you ever stabbed someone with scissors?
No, never. Believe it or not, I have not stabbed anyone.
Apparently, I didn't stab someone with scissors, but I had poked a friend with scissors, but I guess it poked through their jeans, and I was labeled as that psycho that stabbed me with a pair of scissors for a whole summer. It was not a nice feeling.
I had a friend that accidentally cut the tip of my middle finger off, and she was Australian and from Melbourne. And from this day to this very day, I do refer to her as the Mad Butcher of Melbourne.
Oh, well, that's nice of you. That is nice of you. There is gore later on in the film, but I don't recall that there's a lot throughout the film from the beginning to end. It's sort of bookmarked with this.
Yes, but there's some ooey gooiness to it. The Jon Stewart classroom sequence is fairly gory. He does get stabbed in the eye, although the credits indicate that he's okay, folks. It's very weird. but it's I think it's because even though that this is coming out into a point in which you would expect teen films to be gory, Scream is a gory movie. People are brutally killed in that film. And as some other films that we're going to be tackling a little bit later on the show, those are also fairly gory. But also, I can't neglect the fact that a lot of my brain has inserted the PG-13 horror phenomenon of the 2000s, early to mid 2000s, where I see a bunch of young teens in a school, and I just kind of assume it's probably not going to be that gory.
No, that definitely happens, especially because there was a whole bunch of movies before that that we might relate to more with like License to Drive or even Lost Boys isn't super duper gory. Any movie that has to do with teens and horror typically isn't. Not that it's Goosebumps level stuff, but it's just what we watched a heck of a lot more of.
We are going to, after this horrific event in which we see a group of teachers who are told in very direct terms from their principal that they are not going to be get certain funding for certain things, they got, except for, of course, the wonderful football team, because this is a football town, Lydia, and everyone is going to be at these football games. And so, it's like an NCAA type thing. There's a lot of money in high school football, I suppose. And after this horrific murder scene in which we see their principal ultimately killed by the football coach, and I suppose the drama teacher is who Piper Laurie is playing, who was always a welcome presence, only recently passed away a couple years ago. But we are going to get our teens, and simultaneously from meeting all of our teens, we are going to be meeting even more members of the faculty. I am not kidding about the size of this cast. Now, they do away with a lot of these characters, not in the way you'd think. They just stop filming them, I guess. But you get this sense that they're trying to make it feel like a real school, but also the school seems so overpopulated, not just by characters that have dialogue and names and we know who they are, but just in these crowd shots where it looks like there's 200, 300 extras all over the place. And you're asking yourself, how big is this town? It's in this fictional place in Ohio, and they seem to be referring to it as a town. And so you think, okay, how many kids of high school age would a town have? This looks like a high school populated in fucking Los Angeles. But that's not really distracting. It just makes it feel like a very lived in world. And if you can't remember all of the characters, like you had pointed out, they're going to give you big, edgy, Tony Hawk style fucking graphics, like you're introducing the fucking Suicide Squad. And you are going to then have the characters repeat their names to each other over and over and over again. And it helps that we have a young Mary Beth who gets to introduce herself, because man, does she want to make friends.
Does she ever? And it's helpful because she gets everyone's names and we get her little backstory. And even though she's so cute and so southern, she feels a little alien at times. And I think it's just a cute little stab at the whole subject matter. But she tries really, really hard to make friends with Stokely for whatever reason. And you know that at given time, this would be the sort of girl that would make friends just easily. But she seems pretty determined. Helpful for us sitting there in a big school setting with all these characters, and some of them come forward with some lines and then disappear forever and don't really even have names. We get quite a bit of that here and there. But I went to a fairly big high school in a town that had 5 high schools, and it wasn't a big town, but all the schools seemed really big with populations of over 1,000. But then there was a out in the countryside high school that was massive, Almaguin Highlands, and it was like I don't even know how many students went there. It was huge. It was a huge maze of a school with multiple gigantic buildings, and it just seemed like there was like 25,000 kids there. There was probably about 2,000 students, but it seemed like 25,000 fucking kids. It really, really did. So I'm wondering if the idea was that it's supposed to be one of those catch-all high schools where it's the one high school in a town, but all the little little cities, little towns, and little villages around it send all the kids there. But yeah, I don't think they did a very good job of hiding the fact that it's California.
No, none whatsoever. But we do meet our cast of characters. You know, Josh Hartnett playing this character, Zeke, who's a no good Nick, but who's also a super scientist, genius biologist, chemist,
Yeah.
with the goofiest hair. I want people to know, gang, if you are young and you're like, you see Josh Hartnett's haircuts in all of his movies, I need you to understand that nobody had this haircut. Nobody had the kitchen scissors, went to bed with my hair wet look that he is sporting. And I don't know what the choice with this guy was. He must have just liked having this hair, and the miscut bedhead look maybe was something that he thought was his thing. It is ruthlessly ridiculed online these days, but it's so fucking distracting. He is one of the weirdest characters in this film, just in terms of the things that he can do. Um, he also doesn't really apply himself. He's got these absentee parents, but they're not no good nicks themselves. They're not druggies or anything like that. They're like away in Europe doing probably sciency stuff. And we meet like Elijah Wood's character who's getting his nuts rammed into a pole. Just reminded me of that scene from The Sadness. And that's the only thing I can concentrate on when you see it out of the corner of your eye. Jordana Brewster's in this in her first fucking film role. Usher is in this. And I need, like, Jon Stewart's one of the teachers. Like, I need to emphasize that so many of these people who were going to become uber famous at the like later on in years are sometimes in this movie for just a couple of scenes, and really are just elevated forms of background characters that are meant to be absorbed by this presence. One of the things that this film is, that you guys should know going into it, is a very 90s slick version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, one of my favorite films from the 1950s. The remake from the 70s is okay. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as the original, but that's my hot take. Um, this is very well done for keeping in terms of its sci-fi origins. And what I like about this film so much is how it is unapologetic about being that Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Kevin Williamson has no problem name dropping actors and film titles. They go into the Invasion of the Body Snatchers film and the book, and they basically just say this is what we're doing, and it will allow characters to make quantum leaps in judgment that will help them hatch the plot that is about to unfold before their eyes, because Elijah Wood and Jordana Brewster are going to end up in the closet together as the only scenario that could happen with the head cheerleader slash editor in chief of the school newspaper and the nerdy little photography boy.
I mean, they probably already had a thing for each other, right? 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 Like, right?
Delilah had a boyfriend, has a boyfriend, Stan, who
On the football team.
yeah, well, not anymore because he's having second thoughts. He's like, maybe I'm not meant for football, you guys.
Maybe I wanna be a little nerdy photographer too. Maybe he picked up on her getting a shine on Casey. So I don't know. I will say that you had mentioned previously about Salma Hayek's character as well being cast so deliciously differently. I'll I do love that while that is a huge cast, they do get the teachers really right. They get the teens fairly right as you can get teens in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was part of
Mm-hmm.
our discussion earlier, how it just, like, they just can't really write teens properly. But, you had mentioned something about the casting of Salma Hayek's character, not like she was in, let's say, Dogma or something like that.
Well, Robert Rodriguez being the director of this film, I would assume that he brought her over because of From Dusk Till Dawn, where she has I see that image. Maybe it's again, I'm telling on myself, my For You page or whatever. I see that image of Salma Hayek from Dusk Till Dawn constantly. That is one of the most gorgeous women probably who has ever lived. And I think, I mean, oh my God, she's only getting more beautiful with age. I'm very distracted by Salma Hayek. And I think that the joke might have been, I can't entirely remember when From Dusk Till Dawn came out, but I'm pretty sure it was like 95 or 96 or something like that. And I'm fairly certain to like, what if we put Salma Hayek in this movie and she's like sick and snotty and frumpy and she's constantly popping pills because she's sick and she's the school nurse and it doesn't work because she looks so beautiful still. I was very happy to see Salma Hayek in this picture. But again, you're like, oh, what's going to happen to Salma Hayek's character? Don't worry about that.
It is very much Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and it makes me think that some teenager sat at the knee of the writer and said, Daddy, we watched like Invasion of the Body Snatchers and The Thing, and can you just write one like for me? Because those just don't do it for me. I'm not scared by these monsters, and I don't care about all these old fuddy duddies worrying about other people around them. I want the teens to worry about people around them in teen fashions. That's interesting to me with hot chicks and good-looking guys with bad bed hair. Like, it seems that it is just sucking all of the adult problems out of those sorts of films and overlaying teen problems, like not fitting in, being accused of being gay, liking the cheerleader, being the school photographer, that comes with all that, being a drug dealer on campus. Like, as fun and cool as Josh Hartnett's character makes it out to be, it's not. It would be scary, it would be weird, it would be there's a lot of pressure there, I'm sure.
And the march of conformity. It's this
Mhm.
idea of this piece in being part of the group that is a theme that is repeated over and over again in this film. If you were to only conform and be the person that you're expected to be, you will lead a happier life. Some characters do end up doing that and conform to expectations for their own good. But there are characters that kind of go against the grain and realize their potential in a different way. One thing that I wanted to point out about the acting and the writing specifically is I definitely feel as though the young cast in particular elevates the dialogue for the teens because of the fact that many of these actors would go on to be very famous and very successful and very good at their craft. So I think it does elevate some of what I do believe are very cringy expository scenes that are not very well written, that don't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. And we'll get to those scenes when they come. But for now, Casey and Delilah are in a situation in which they see something fairly horrific. Now, previously, one of their older teachers comes to Stan while he's showering for football and is fucking falling apart, melting. And we assume, we cut away from that. We assume after the bell rings that the ambulances perhaps took her away. And in the midst of sleuthing, Delilah and Casey will end up into the faculty room itself.
It seems that like, wouldn't you think that they would, like, call, not just an ambulance, but, like, hazmat or something? Because it seems that there's, like, radioactivity going on. People don't just melt like that, they really don't. Um, I do like that we get some gore. It is kind of unsettling and gory. It's just weird that there's, like, a female teacher in the men's shower area too.
we'll get into a little bit of the weird dynamics between female and male students, up to and including Famike Jansin's sequences with Josh Hartnett's character Zeke, which I suspect is why they point out that he skipped a grade for his senior year. I think they wanted to like indicate that he's 18 years old. So trying to like have a bit of verbal wordplay with a rather meek, but of course devastatingly beautiful teacher, while he asks if she wants cherry flavored condoms and stuff, is a little bit more above board than it normally would be. And you and I had spoken a little bit before the episode about how, well, you know, male students can be gross like this, or however you want to interpret it. Yes, but it does seem out of sync for this film, as well as how Stokely's character is portrayed as perhaps she is gay, but it turns out she's not. She just uses this idea that she is a lesbian so everyone leaves her alone. And when Mary Beth attempts to befriend her, very strangely, it's like you see the sort of edge case. I'm not going to call her a goth girl because she's not necessarily gothy, but it's coded in towards that interpretation. She's got the chain around her neck, a little punk, a little alternative, whatever.
Like a Riot Girl, if everyone remembers Riot
I do
Girls.
remember Riot Girls. That's more appropriate, a Riot Girl. And when Delilah, who we're supposed to like carry on as a character throughout the rest of this film, sees Mary Beth just talking to her, she interrupts with some flagrant homophobia to the point in which you would ask, why is this present in this film and is treated like, listen, I'm not going to get into a whole thing. Movies are not responsible for the time period in which they were made. I wholeheartedly believe that. But even in the late 1990s, this seems egregious to have a character just call her a fucking muff diver and don't talk to her because she's gay and she'll try to fuck you.
It makes me wonder if maybe she was rebuffed at one point, and I would have accepted this a lot better if it would have turned out that she had come on to Stokely at one point, even like on the QT, and then being repulsed. And that's why she's got this, like, retaliatory homophobia, perhaps, like, this outsiderness, and that's what I really like about it this film, is that it is just a gang of misfits, really, even the popular kids, gang of misfits that all kinda band together into a Scooby Squad and get the job done. Being an outsider is exactly what kicks a lot of this off. Well, being an outsider is what kicks off the alien invasion? No. Being an outsider is what kicks off Casey eating lunch alone in the football field and finding that little creature that he brings in to science class, which is like a little axolotl or whatever. So they've got sea monkeys going on. That coupled with the weird fixation on water from these previously a little more animated faculty who are all kind of now super stoic, super calm, drinking tons of water, acting weird, not totally pod people, but sort of like on the edge of pod people activities. And then yeah, the closet scene where we get to see probably the next most gory scene of everyone's favorite Selma Hayek getting what a creature barfed into her ear.
Yeah, and it gives you an idea. The one thing that I will say, this film does not hide its premise from you. From the get-go, you know that something is up and that there is a conspiracy. And then in a film that has a nearly 2-hour runtime, we get a reveal on exactly how these creatures multiply and what these creatures are, from both the John Stewart science class scene in which they're going to bring this specimen to the university. Can't be bothered to even name it. They're just like the university. And we get to see these creatures in all their CGI glory. And then yes, also we're going to see how the transference of these creatures occurs. And for the fact that you are looking at a clearly alien creature that this adult man who's a science teacher can't identify, you see it multiply literally divide in front of you into another fully fledged creature. And the only, like, everyone's reaction is so nonplussed, but there's a part of me that wonders, so many people were probably dealing with special effects for the first time in those days. They don't really know how they're going to react. They don't know how they're going to animate the creatures, and it's obvious. What I will say about the CGI in this film, some of it is fucking rough. And I, again, I normally am not, I don't personally mind when CGI is a little rough, particularly when it's from this era, because there was lots of films from this era that did a pretty good job, and some of that special effects holds up to this day. And there's also even more films where the special effects don't. But just in case you're the type of person who is kind of weirded out, or does take you out with kind of floaty, improperly lit CGI effects, this might hit you in the wrong way. But I suspect that they saved all of their budget for the finale, and I think that's where all the money for the CGI went, to make sure that the piece de resistance was as good as it possibly can be. Now, the police have been called. Elijah Wood, or Casey and Delilah. I'll try not to call them by their actors' names, but sometimes it's just easier to me.
I do the same thing, so
Yeah.
don't worry about it at all.
We understand what they have seen. They understand what we have seen. And so instead, we are watching the conspiracy unfold in front of us with full knowledge that these conspiracies are happening. Now, another very famous conspiracy driven television show did this exact thing, The X Files. The X Files from the pilot episode is like, no, there's fucking aliens. There's no, there is no, there is aliens and there is government cover up immediately, first fucking episode. And I think that this intrigue and distrust of authority was very prevalent in the 1990s. And so trying to make the characters, is it or is it not a conspiracy? I don't think the audience would have much tolerance for that. I think it goes without saying that authority figures can't be trusted. It goes without saying that the only people that will understand the truth are some plucky outsider young people. That's all part of the reality as we understand it from this time period that we're living.
And they're not kids on bikes saving the neighborhood either. These are teenagers with cars or access to cars. And if you're a 7-year-old kid going like, my neighbor's a vampire, you understand that no one's going to believe them. But these are like, yeah, these are kids that drive cars, and it's the metamorphosis of the kids on bikes saving the neighborhood, or Cobsons, as I like to call them. And I really think that this is a whole milieu, and it obviously is, because there's lots of films that people gravitate toward, and then people tend to forget these kids grow up and they still have these same problems, and we get movies like It Follows and I guess The Faculty, where these were the kids on bikes saving the neighborhood, where it might have been easier for them to band together with tinfoil hats and fight the X-Files creature of the week. But it's harder in a way when you have the knowledge that is sort of disarming you, because they're on the edge of thinking, "This is bullshit." We saw something, that tricked our eyes, that tricked our perception of what was going on, or all the adults must be right. They're really on the edge of that, but also have to trust their senses and know what they saw because they're adults, specifically because of that. I mean, all they need is photographic evidence now. But they do have one teacher that seems to be on their side, and that's the science teacher.
Maybe there's a lot of conflation of circumstances that happen to get all of these characters in a room for each other. There's one point in which we have a long, drawn out dialogue scene between Stokely and Casey in a library, a literal library scene, in which they are discussing science fiction, the idea that the Casey just like a conservative on a podcast just throws out fucking theories about how all directors are probably space aliens preparing the human race for acceptance of domination. And And Tokely doesn't believe any of it, but of course is a big science fiction fan, and so starts telling him about Invasion of the Body Snatchers, in which Casey will take what she's talking about and then drawing his conclusions based off of that. And then all of a sudden, they're in the science lab and Stan is there. I'm like, where the fuck did this guy come from? Like, and he literally has lines like, will someone tell me what the hell is going on? I was like, why did you go to the science room with them? Where did they meet you? Where did you come from? Meanwhile, Zeke and Mary Beth are smooching. They're smooching. They're looking for stuff because um, Zeke has had a rather uh, harrowing encounter with Famika Jensen's character, who is grabbing the back of his neck, saying, "You can suck on my fucking toes," and like she's dressed, she's vamped out, and you're like, what is this tone? Like, what the fuck?
It's a dangerous thing. It's a very dangerous thing they're playing, I think, with this particular moment in this, because they could have gone with just the undertones of hot for teacher, right? Like, lots of 18-year-old boys or 17-year-old boys or 12-year-old boys have a crush on their female teacher, especially those so beautiful. It's a real problem sometimes. We had a teacher that was just a gorgeous woman, young too, which didn't help. And we also had a student that I grew up with all my life who wasn't this kind of guy, but he decided one day to tape mirrors to his shoes. Literal, like a fucking cartoon character out of the 50s. Taped mirrors to his shoes so he could see up her skirt. Of
Jesus.
course, he got caught and in trouble, but it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing for everybody in that classroom, embarrassing doubly for all the women, and super embarrassing for that teacher. Like, what the fuck?
And they're definitely doing this in front of a large student body who's all kind of like, can you believe this is happening? I'm like, this is very sexual. I don't know. And I'm not just reading into it. It is coded that way. That is written like this on purpose. But that's not the most harrowing thing, because Mary Beth and Zeke are going to enter this science lab, and Zeke is going to go from scoffing and laughing at Casey's theory about alien pod people to like John Wick kicking off the blade of a paper cutter and chopping Jonathan Stewart's fucking fingers off. Toot sweet, no hesitation. He, like, John Stewart grabs, I believe, Delilah, and he's just like, boot fucks it off. Oh, like, and then when the fingers start crawling around and stuff like that, he's like, okay, and in a desperation maneuver, he is going to stab him in the eye with his homemade drugs, Lydia.
Homemade drugs. And that's, it's those sorts of things about this character that make him just seem too too perfect, right? Like he's the good-looking guy that could get anyone, that has um was held back a class because he's super cool and he's a drug dealer and he's super rich and he has a car and he's John Wick. Because the change in tone there was really wild. They did do a little foreshadow to the paper cutter. Give them a little credit where it's due, but it does seem like too action packed and like he's too well trained for this sort of activity. It's a weird scene. It is weird. Also, John Stewart. I look at him and I think, wow, he hasn't aged a day. But then you look at a picture of him, I'm like, whoa, he has certainly aged. But eh, again, like another one of those great actors that is in this that became super crazy famous afterward and continues to be super crazy fucking famous. That I don't recall seeing him in another movie, but maybe he just kind of bled into the background.
I've seen him in other things, but mostly like comedies and stuff like that.
Hmm.
This is weirdly the movie in which he plays a parasitic alien that has fingers that crawl around like little animals. The one of the more serious roles he's done, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, no, this is where they sort of discover their their water trick, or that the aliens are allergic to our air trick. It is that something in those drugs floors this alien teacher.
This is where Josh Hartnett, the character of Zeke, as I'm just gonna call Mary Sue the most direct in the most direct way. I don't like using that term because I believe that that term has been co-opted by misogynists who don't like
Mhm.
when women play any character with any level of competency. But in this case, I think that the good-looking hustler, genius, action star, chemist, like zoologist, like it's too much. It's too much. And for a guy who in the end isn't really the star of the fucking movie. Like you would think that this is an ensemble cast, but the film does directly lead to various scenes that indicate who really the star of the film is, who gets the final blow. But they realize that most of the all of the faculty, most of the student body are aliens at this point, and they are it's like a scene from The Birds. They're just trying to leave the fucking property while all these people are looking at them drinking water. And they understand, as Casey has pointed out, that they took the school in a day and a half, and if they give it any more time, who knows how far and wide this thing can spread. But they need a plan, and they need to understand how these things work. And so they drive back to the police have been compromised. They know this. They drive back to Zeke's place. His parents are in Europe, and it allows them to see his chem lab where he makes his drugs. He has a gun, which is helpful for threatening people. And then we have a scene right out of The Thing that instead of taking people's blood samples, where McReady is exposing the blood to fire because he makes the quantum leap that everything of those things is like independent, maybe because he saw the head. That's a better the thing is a better written movie. They in this film they figure out that these things are attracted to water. Not only do they attracted to water, they need water to survive. By using a rodent as an experiment, Josh Hartnett figures out that not only are these things going to die without any sort of water in the immediate area, and is using us as a transference of that because humans are mostly water. He also, by cutting this creature open and looking at it for a second, determines that all of these things are connected to each other. They are a part of a superorganism. How does he draw that conclusion? Who cares? Then they together postulate that there has to be a leader creature or a primary creature. And before this scene is over, they will just say, we need to find the queen and kill it. So they go with minutes of not knowing what the fuck is going on to like, and then as if to squeak it under the door so no one thinks that it's too ridiculous that they come up with this all on their own. They always have a character that's just like, maybe, in theory, I guess. They just like it's probably a queen, and if we kill the queen, they'll all die because they're all connected, and the drug works because it's hydrophobic. And it's like, are you sure? I don't know, maybe. But no, that is exactly what happens.
That's exactly what happens, and like they have any other ideas at this point, because they've wasted over half the film. Well, not wasted, but spent over half the film establishing everything else, all this this gargantuan cast. We meet people's parents. We get to see interactions between the staff and other students that don't even matter. So it's not like wasted time. I really misspoke there, but they have spent a lot of time. So they kind of got to get to the premise, right? They kind of got to get to every other sci-fi movie, the outcome of every other fucking sci-fi movie. And they don't really exactly lift it from every other movie, but that's what they got to try, because they've got this Peter Parker slash Arthur Fonzarelli character, Well, really, that's what he is. He's so super cool, but he's so super smart. He's not even selling drugs at school, Wes.
No, it's just caffeine. Don't tell anybody.
Caffeine, it's like, a diuretic, so it's cut with other things too, like, it's basically the equivalent of selling caffeine powders and baby formula or whatever. So, he's not even that much of a dark horse. He's more Peter Parker than Arthur Fonzarelli.
Yeah, it's a kind of a scam. He's like selling people pre-workout to snort up their nose.
It's very lame, but it's adorable on how serious they take this scene with the thing sort of in our minds as them trying to prove who is a creature and who isn't. Who really snorts it though, and who doesn't is the answer, is a question.
Jordana Brewster is definitely going to snort it because they are going to suss her out too sweet. There is a funny thing that somebody points out in the movie where they're just like, why all of a sudden, I was like, I haven't seen you go without your contacts and hairspray since we were in like first grade. And then she's like, I'm incognito. Because I was curious, this is that part of the 1990s where like anytime anyone was doing something smart, all of a sudden they have glasses. Like Josh Hartnett just has glasses in this scene. Like he just has glasses when he's doing all of his science stuff. And then when he's done doing science stuff, he's not wearing glasses anymore. Jordana Brewster is the same situation. Delilah is one of the infected, and she manages to make an escape. Why the aliens are not just descending in the hundreds, if not thousands, onto the last remaining non controlled humans is beyond me, but I would imagine it has something to do with their queen. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Now,
It's so much more fun this way, I guess.
yeah, I don't want to nitpick that shit because if you don't do that, you don't have a movie. And by the way, I know I'm kidding this scene pretty hard, and I also agree with you that we waste time. Like, there's a scene in which like we have to like look at Elijah Wood's parents grounding him, taking away his porno. I'm like, what is the point of this? Like we are waiting for characters to learn something that we as an audience already know, and I am already at a prickly towards plots that are that way, where I'm waiting for characters to come to their senses so they can know what I know. It can be very aggravating where you're just like, ugh, why do we have to? No one believes them, but this is literally what's happening. And if you made it a question of whether or not it's happening, then you have my attention because it's like, I don't know, there's a lot of logic. Is there a conspiracy here or not? But no, there definitely is. And they are going to use their remaining collection of drugs because they got to go find the queen and kill the queen. So they are going to drive to the school who's having a big old flashy football game. And they are using the football game every time that they tackle. They are just infecting now an outside town with more of these little critters, Lids.
It's so nefarious. I always knew that football games were up to no good. It's a great reason to never, ever, ever go to a football game, but it also explains why they're drawn back to the school. Because at this point, if they took it out of the school, then it kind of becomes like the town, not the faculty, right? They got to keep it isolated, you know? That we even went to someone's house and left the school grounds is interesting. At least they sort of had a leg up. They could have just hopped in that car and took off entirely, but no, they have to save the neighborhood. So they come back to the school, which is kind of adorable.
They do. They have a plan, Lids. They believe that Principal Drake, cool name, Principal Drake, who we saw brutally murdered at the beginning of this film, who is, of course, okay because she is infected, they believe her to be the most logical in this universe. No one has more authoritative power than a high school principal. And so that person is most likely the queen that they're searching for. And So they lure her. You want to talk? You've referred to them several times as their Scooby Doo gang, which is completely accurate. They have a full on Scooby Doo plan. It may as well be like, all right, gang, now let's go over this one more time. When Principal Drake comes into the gymnasium, we use the makeshift volleyball net to catch her. Then we'll get her to sniff the drugs, revealing her to be the queen. So we know for sure.
The thing I don't like about their Scooby Doo-ness is that it was so much more atmospheric only moments before. Like it's nighttime, the school is creepy at night. They had the footballers chasing them, they had other students, like they're surrounded by infected, like ultimately surrounded. They're having infighting in between each other because no one trusts anyone anymore, much like it happens in the thing. So they're running low on resources, they're running low on patience, they're running low on time because pretty soon, at the rate that these creatures were infecting people, they should be more than surrounded, right? So it just seems like a goony change of pace to me.
I think that there is a so this was based off of a script that was not Kevin Williamson's. Originally, the it was a duo. I can't remember their name, but Kevin Williamson went over and did a rewrite to sort of zhuzh it up to make sure that it was a little bit more like Scream. And this was a phenomenon that not just Kevin Williamson did. There was mandates across the board from many people that already had horror films in production. Make it more like Scream, make it funnier, make it self-referential, reference other horror films, let the audience know that they're in on the joke. Critics liked it, audiences responded to it, and it made a lot of money. So I suspect this sequence is either seems out of place because it was part of the original script that had a different tone, but I suspect this is a Kevin Williamson original.
As is rampant crawling creature headlessness and some of the effects that maybe I don't know, I think that they hold up fairly well. I really do. I think it's fun, and it is more horror than comedy for the most part.
There is there is a sense when you're looking at this um you want to talk about like really upping the sexual tension, the inappropriate sexual attention between an adult and a child. Like I guess Josh Hartnett's character must be 18 years old, but now we have Famika Jensen's character, his teacher, Mrs. Burke, I believe her name is. She is full on flirtation. It is just the two of them. She is like indicating that she wants to use the condoms. She is like calling him pet names, and it is going to result in a mild car chase where the hoariest of 90s cliches, if you put on a seatbelt, you are invulnerable to all harm that occurs during a head-on collision going 60 miles an hour. His teacher is decapitated, and we get ourselves an octopus head in which I do like him kind of bowing to the absurdity of it all and just saying, fuck this, and leaving. And it does result in one of my favorite things in this film, which is the reveal. Because we know Stan, who gets to smooch Stokely and gets to go and see if killing their principal, Mrs. Drake, because they dissolve her effectively. It really makes it sad when you think about the people that actually did end up dying by the end of this film versus they probably could have saved her if they didn't literally dissolve her into nothing. But particularly since we got to see her get so brutally killed at the beginning of the movie, and then we just get her see her killed yet again. We think that the leader must be the coach, maybe, but we see him taking a drink because it's raining and he's got his full-on goofy angry face. But unfortunately, Stan does not get away, And it costs them 2 more of their dosages of this drug, by the way, which they are running dangerously low on. And this also will get Stokely and Mary Beth alone together, in which Mary Beth has decided to drop the act, shall we say, which is another thing that I misremembered. I misremembered the Queen being Famika Jensen's character because I was
Oh,
thinking about the headless tentacle scene, and I was like,
yeah.
yeah, I think the reveal is like, oh, it's so funny that she's like this meek little teacher, but she's ends up being the queen alien. No, no, no. It's Mary Beth, the more obvious choice of the outsider who just sort of showed up in this town, wanted to be friends with everybody, and then starts talking about the joy and the happiness and the absence of fear of being part of something greater than yourself.
Which is so creepy sounding. But again, she's still trying to make friends with Stokely, which is even weirder. Someone who's pushed her away and pushed her away over and over. She has multiple victims that she could be picking on. Why she keeps picking on my favorite character, my pet character, Stokely, is kind of beyond me. But I guess it's also that person that remains on the fringes that is the most vulnerable.
I was wondering how you would respond to the character of Stokely, because sometimes, not all the time, and I know you've had a change of heart about the characters in Ginger Snaps, for example.
Mhm.
But like I was not sure. I was like, does this seem cliche to you? Does this seem like some like middle class, middle aged white guy being like, I think this is probably what a riot girl probably is like. I don't know.
No, I think it is a fairly accurate portrayal, and the fact that she is just fine with being othered is good because that's a lot of the time how a lot of other people behave. I remember at one point I was asked by some high school comrades about my book I had written, and it's like, well, what the fuck did you think I was doing in high school? Just hanging out waiting for you to harass me? And they laughed, that sort of uneasy laugh. Like, "You think I was just there to be bullied all day? You think that's what I did? You think I spent my time cowering from you? I was off doing other things that were important to me. Like, you're kind of an NPC, sorry to say, to the more popular people." So I think that it's good that she maybe doesn't express what are those other things she does that fleshes out her character, but she does make a point of wanting to just fly under the radar.
I think that there's a very admirable and kind of inspiring way that Clea Duvall plays this character. I love the confidence of the character. There are moments of shyness because she does like Stan. It's kind of a cliche. The edge case riot girl likes a football boy. But he's sensitive, right? Because he doesn't want to be a football player, you see. So that's why
Mhm.
you can understand why it would work. But her being completely okay with her position in high school, accepting and using other people's homophobia as as a way to keep people away from her. And
Yeah, like a smokescreen
yeah,
entirely.
like I don't particularly feel comfortable with like the my current day mentality to that being used in the writing, but at the same time, for the character, if we're just existing purely in the world of the character and forgetting the fact that she was written by somebody, I think that it's very interesting way to go about it and refreshing, because at no point does she even think that she wants to belong to this, like, to the normies. She's not interested. She's fine with where she is. And that's how
Mm.
come when Mary Beth starts saying this stuff to her, none of it's appealing. And the only other character that really we see openly defy this rhetoric is Casey, who also is going to be tempted, let's say, by his editor in chief, um, captain of the, or sorry, head cheerleader, gorgeous Jordana Brewster, who goes so far as to say, "We can be together if you just like we'll be together when we do this." And he patently rejects that. Mary Beth does transform into a big octopus monster. Now,
It's like we could just end the show there, and that's it. She she transformed into a big octopus. I will add that I do like that Stokely's a very regular looking girl. They have to amp up the grease in her hair a little bit to make her a little more regular than just a gorgeous person that she is. But like she's not like ultra hot. Where I've one of my biggest pet peeves is when the goth chick is just a regular girl with black eyeliner, and she's usually like supermodel level good looking, and people treat it like the person's an outcast when they're clearly not. I think that they balanced her very well. But this is the pool scene that you had alluded to earlier.
that's correct. Also, I just want to say Clea Duvall is so beautiful. I am.
Yes.
I always think about her getting decapitated in the Ghost of Mars, John Carpenter's Ghost of Mars movie. That she really is unceremoniously killed in that movie, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't, as a kid, like that movie, because the lady that I was very often distracted by when I was a young man was unceremoniously killed. I didn't like that because
Wouldn't it make more sense if Josh Hartnett's character and her character, like, isn't that the more natural pairing in this
I
film?
100% agree,
Mhm.
except he is going to end up with his fucking teacher. And that is, I don't care how other people want to interpret that. We'll get to that because that's
Mhm.
where
Mhm.
this goes. I am fucking not joking. Anyways, this is the scene that I do remember very vividly. I think because it's so memorable. This scene's fucking cool. I love this sequence in the pool. And if I could praise this movie for anything, and by the way, like I know, like I kid some things. I've said this before. I kid this movie pretty hard. This is a good movie. Like, and this last action sequences, I love this shit with Casey, but I really love it when it gets to the locker rooms. And Zeke has this hilarious, they're still not trusting each other because, you know, Stokely gets pulled into the fucking water. And you think, okay, she has managed to get away. This thing spits these little, like wiggly guys like nothing, right? And so we find out, oh my God, she's infected. We find out that Mary Beth, who's nude now, she's just walking around completely naked, not convincing anyone that she's not the alien queen now. And Zeke has the hilarious line. It's like, I was gone for 5 minutes, and every one of you is an alien. And it's, it's so good.
Oh, pretty much. I like this, and it continues with the dark tone of the creepy school. I mean, nothing scares me more than a locker room at night, you know? Not that I've ever found myself in one, but that is like stuff of nightmares, especially for anyone who is like a school paper photographer who this is not their natural climate. I mean, it's the natural climate of someone like Zeke, who, aside from his fawns leanings, is a football star. We can't forget that. No matter how cool he is, I don't remember if he's wearing a hemp necklace or not, but he might as well be.
He's not, but you're totally right.
That this is like where he comes from, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, the we are going to kind of jump around a little bit with the editing. This sequence is not edited super well because certain characters just kind of vanish, but it basically comes down to a really well done monologue scene where Mary Beth is walking. Her shadow, not her, but her shadow exhibits these Lovecraftian tentacles all across the wall as she walks in perfect perfectly obscuring her nude body. It's so beautiful to look at. It's really fucking cool. But then we cut rather quickly as Elijah Wood's character Casey runs away from it, and all of a sudden she's just like fully transformed, and throwing lockers around, and then we have this fucking chase sequence. And by the way, Mary Beth, this alien queen, can change its size. I don't know if being submerged totally in water, like one of those little dinosaurs that you put in warm water in the sink and it grew bigger. I don't know if she is getting larger because she's just so bloated with fluids, but maybe. But they're going to have this chase sequence that's going to lead to the gymnasium, and Elijah Wood is going to trap it under the bleachers. I used to always be afraid of those bleachers in high school gymnasiums. I used to think all the time, someone's going to get crushed under those. Someone's going to get, I didn't like going near them when they were open because I always just had this horrible Final Destination like vision of me getting squished by bleachers in a high school gymnasium. And this does happen in that film in which the creature is trapped and Casey manages to pull off a Ash Evil Dead like one-liner. It'll pump you up and stabs it right in the eye. But simultaneously, this thing spits more of those creatures into Casey's face. But we get to have demonstrated to us that yes, killing this creature with this drug does kill all of the little dudes.
What I didn't get is I forgot about the bleacher scene entirely for whatever reason because it's pretty fantastic. But what convinced them that killing the queen will save everything? Because it's not vampires. These are not vampires. We know this about, well, supposedly know this about fictional vampires, that you kill the leader and all its little drones turn back into actual normal people. I don't know. I don't remember how they came to this conclusion. I do remember very clearly Stokely being trapped in a ball cage or whatever cage. Why they have cages in schools, in gymnasiums, is beyond me. But again, this is not my territory. But hoping against hope that this would be true.
They have the cages to lock up the expensive sporting equipment. It's to prevent theft because a lot of those football helmets and football gear very expensive, and they need that in theory to last multiple years, and so to just prevent theft, basically that's why those cages are there. But the question that you have is a damned good one, and if you go back to that scene where Zeke is wearing his glasses and looking at a microscope and explaining all of this, it is based off of nothing. It is really based off of nothing. You are not missing, you weren't looking at your phone, you didn't fall asleep. There is no dialogue that would bear any evidence that this is true. This is just an assumption. Josh Hartnett's character of Zeke makes an assumption that these things are all connected based off of fucking what? How you could understand alien biology or the idea that these things could be psychically, because let's be real, it would be psychically linked at this point, because even if you were to kill, you're basing it off of termites or you're basing it off of ants or bees. If you kill the queen of those insects, the rest of the colony doesn't just drop dead and dissolve. I don't know of any animal on Earth that does. So why you would come to this conclusion is buck fucking wild. And the craziest thing is that instead of going the direction of like silly mortals, you have no idea whereof you speak. They're just right.
Because that's the power of teens. That's the power of kids on bikes saving the neighborhood. Is that they can throw black licorice at a monster and it'll just dissolve and all their friends will not be succumbing to the deadlights anymore or whatever, like in the end of it. So, you know, like, yeah, just because they're teens and they're lucky, or because the power of friendship, even though none of them really seem very friendly with Stokely.
Yeah, like, because it could easily be Night of the Creeps. Like Night of the Creeps, each one of those things works independently from each other. Even in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, in all versions of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, there is no concept that you need to destroy the glowing weak point of the leader. In that sense, it's very much like some of those Roland Emmerich. By the way, Emmerich is a director that they cite in the script of
Mhm.
in Independence Day, you just destroy the mothership and all the other ships just fucking die. Like it's just these logic leaps of like a video game, really seriously, like a video game. You just need to, you've made yourself, you've written yourself into a corner to the point in which how do you contend with thousands of these creatures that have taken over thousands of people and still have your happy ending? And they wanted that happy ending. And that is one of the things that I think separates the faculty from pretty much every science fiction story that's like this. There is no post-credit sequence in which, oh, you didn't kill all of them. Nothing like that whatsoever. There is no last minute reveal that this plan didn't work. It absolutely works. And even teachers that we have seen receive fatal wounds will just be around. And it really is like 1 month later, and everyone is just happy and go lucky. And some faculty members have gone missing, but most of them are okay. And Famika Jensine, she lost her head and put it back on. And I guess it just regenerated her, and
Mhm.
she's fine now. And we see that Stokely and Stan are fine, and they're together and they're kissing. And Zeke now is no longer a no good Nick. He is playing football, and the coach is back to normal. Everyone's back to normal that didn't grievously die, which, like, I guess is just the principle. And you would think the science teacher, nope, because they do a little jokey joke. Jon Stewart during the credits is okay.
Everything's back to normal. So normal, in fact, that Stokely washed her hair. Famika Jensen, the teacher, is dressed a little geeky, which is very weird to me. Like, did she suddenly stop cosplaying as a teacher and admit she's just a student, or something? Because it was just
Well,
very, very strange to me. Usher's back. Everyone's back. But the weirdest transformation to me is Stokely, because she's wearing like cute preppy girl outfits, a little like sweater and stuff, and she probably wears bobby socks and Oxfords. Like, she looks like a totally different person, and it's like they washed the beginning of goth out of her to make her all normal. And I never liked that. If there's anything about that character I don't like, it's that.
yeah, it's like the Breakfast Club, right? It's like the worst thing that you could
Yeah.
do to a character is wash out the alternative. Like if all she was, like, oh, she got a boyfriend, so she's not this way anymore. It's not like she was a riot girl or a goth girl already. She was
Mhm.
just like that because she didn't have a boyfriend. Thanks, Kevin Williamson. But no, Famika Jensine's character, she kind of goes into like a halfway hybrid of the meek glasses teacher and then the hot vamp that she was. But she's watching Zeke by herself in the football field, and she gives a smile and a wave as she's watching him have football practice. Gang, gang. If we're wondering why Stokely didn't end up with Zeke and ended up with Stan, and why Casey ends up with Delilah, so don't worry about Stan and Delilah being boyfriend and girlfriend at the beginning of the movie, because they're just gonna go get different boyfriends and girlfriends. It's because Zeke is with his teacher. There is no, you could say I'm wrong for 100 years, scream it in my face. I will never believe you. That scene was written that way to let you know that they're together. Like, even in a way that they're probably not supposed to, but don't worry, he's gonna graduate this year.
Oh, that's so gross. Well, okay. I have to, yes, it's gross. I went to school with a wonderful couple, who were friends with my extended friend group, after school, because during school he was her teacher. And I remember seeing that friend group and a group of teachers at the bar, and just not really thinking much of it. But I guess that's where their relationship blossomed, was like after hours events where these students would hang out with the teachers. I, it was just weird. The age gap later on in retrospect wasn't too bad, but he was her teacher. That's that's terrible and gross. Um, but of course they didn't like formally date until after school. There was none of this waving from the bleachers stuff, which at first I thought it was another student, just a student that I didn't recognize or something. Like I didn't put two and two together right away that that was his teacher. I also just finished reading My Dark Vanessa, which is the horrible, gross version of that sort of story where a teacher is preying upon a young girl, and just so it doubly leaves a bad taste in my mouth seeing this.
It's such an odd choice. Now you could say, I guess the idea would just be to indicate, like, yeah, we saw her get decapitated, but don't worry, folks, she's okay. And finally, the sexual tension between her and Zeke could be alleviated. Casey, on the other hand, has become talk of the town. He's like a Carl Sagan now, or at least somebody who people would want to interview. He's on the cover of Time magazine. Do people think that what happened in this town is a hoax? People aren't really sure. Delilah has written, you know, Man Saves School. So it's they go for the uber, everyone hooks up. It's an uber happy ending, and it's an interesting choice. But I don't think it's an unwelcome one. I just think in the realm of these kind of conspiratorial science fiction, it does leave a bit of optimism that I think reflects the optimism that was going into leaving the 90s and into the 2000s. We're gonna be okay. We're leaving the dystopian, you can never fight the machine. We're leaving that in the 1980s and the 1970s. The people betrayed by the hope of the 1950s and 60s. And now it's a new decade. How naive we were. But it does serve as a good reflection for the time in which it was made.
And a good soundtrack. We didn't even talk about the soundtrack. How it's really not that bad. A lot of popular acts at the time, and like Stabbing Westward was the one band that people glommed onto that I knew of. I think maybe as a result of this and other films, and it was actually very good.
The only thing I was distracted by was the Creed, the Scott Stapp version of the Alice Cooper song "I'm 18," which I was like, why couldn't they get the Alice Cooper one? I guess because they're like, Creed did songs for Scream. We love Creed at Miramax, so perhaps that had something to do with it. Well, you know, and they played another brick in the wall. A lot of teens against authority songs and kids not being all right by The Offspring, I'm thinking of specifically.
Yeah, and that's another standout song, which I had listened to The Offspring before that, so it wasn't like this movie caused any sort of fandom, except for maybe I think Stabbing Westward.
Yeah, I think that I was exposed to Offspring really on I knew one Offspring song from Smash. I think No Self-Esteem or Self-Esteem, that was the song that every kid knew, like when I was in elementary school, but I didn't start listening to them heavily until their Americana album, which I became a really big fan of, and I love Offspring now. But yeah, the soundtrack is a nice little snippet into the decade as well, about just, again, this film heavily marketed as just, what do young kids think is cool? We're gonna do an old-fashioned, really, science fiction story, and we're gonna young it up.
And one of the few films where they play this trick with the soundtrack that actually hit pretty well.
So what do we got next for them?
Coming up next, I Know What You Did Last Summer. I like to just say it as a statement.
We're sticking to the 1990s, and in my humble opinion, one of the best slashers of that entire decade was made off of the heels of Scream, which most people like more, but I contend that they tricked everybody into making this film, because we're going to make it more serious than it has any right to be.
Weird. I watched this when it came out, and I don't remember really liking it because I think I expected something different from it. And I haven't watched it since, so I'm very interested to go back to it. After this, we're going to stay in this sort of 90s teen milieu, so I'm very interested to see what else we can pick from this genre. We started out with a big heavy hitter. Of course, we're not going to do Scream. We don't need to do Scream. We're going to do these other movies that sort of acted as satellites around it, though. And I Know What You Did Last Summer is the one that kind of elicits the most jokes, doesn't it? Because I know what you did last summer. I know what your cousin did last summer. I know what you did last summer too. I know what you did the summer before. All that sort of the spin-off and sequel joke starts with this, and I hardly remember this film at all.
Yeah, I watched it, I want to say last year, maybe last summer, but and when I watched it, I was like, my God, this movie is way more serious than I thought. And people say, oh yeah, there's a lot of meta commentary. No, there's not. No, there is not. This is not a meta slasher film. This is a slasher film that benefited from the success of Scream and got made because of it, but it is not beholden to that format whatsoever.
Thank God.
And on that note, I'm Wes Knight.
And I'm Typical Lydia.
And you've been listening to Dead Air. If you like this show, you can find more episodes and other content on splatterpictures.net, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. We also upload all episodes to YouTube now, if you'd prefer to listen that way. You can find us across social media like Instagram, X, and TikTok, and the show is edited by Lydia Peaver and hosted by Lydia Peaver and me, Wes Knight. We'll see you next time.